Hi everyone, welcome back to our health class. As you guys just watched right now in the instructions video, this week's lesson is all about the cardiovascular system. So let's get right into it. Let me pull up the presentation here. Okay, so before we move on, I am gonna just kind of recap on the few things that I did mention in the instructions video. So first thing was that cardiovascular is the same thing as circulatory. So you might hear me refer to it as either way, the system is the exact same one. And the cardiovascular system is made up of two different parts. The first part is your heart, and the second part are the blood vessels. So the heart is the muscle that obviously pumps the blood to get to the rest of the body, and the blood vessels are the tubes or tunnels that are connected throughout your body that allow the blood to go through everything. So now in the lesson, we're actually going to dive in and go more in detail with what both of these things are. So first off, let's talk about the heart. The heart is considered the muscular pump, and the reason for this is because it is both a muscle that works like a pump. I repeat, so the heart is a muscle that works like a pump. Some people even say it's like two pumps because it's split down into two sides. So this muscle sends blood throughout your body by doing a pumping motion. So as you can see here in that little picture toward the right of your screen, that little red stuff that suddenly go on and then move throughout the heart, that would be the blood that's being moved through every time that muscle is pumping. And so the pumping looks like this. So if this were your heart, it just squeezes, squeezes, squeezes. It's actually more like two of them, and they're like taking turns squeezing on one side and the other side. But for the main purpose of this, just think of it as squeezing, contracting, uncontracting, contracting, uncontracting, and that motion is what's sending that blood throughout the whole body. So the blood has lots of things in it. It takes stuff like oxygen, nutrients, hormones, all sorts of fun stuff to the rest of the body. It also carries waste, so it can be removed from the body because we don't want waste inside our body. That can be really bad if it accumulates and stays inside your body. So the heart is obviously broken down into several different little sections. There's actually 4 chambers in the heart, but if we're just talking about left side versus right side, the right side of your heart is the side that is receiving the blood from your body, and it is then pumping it into the lungs. So if you look into this picture, the right side is that part that's red. So this part doesn't have any oxygen in its blood yet. So it's going to pump that out to your lungs so it can get oxygen. After it gets oxygen, it'll go into the left side of your heart, and then that will distribute it to the rest of your body. So that blue side on the left side means that that blood has oxygen. And so that blood is going to go to the rest of your body and give everyone oxygen and nutrients and everything else it needs to function. So one of the first things I want to talk about is this very famous quote that I'm sure a lot of you have heard, and it says, "And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day." So this was said by Dr. Seuss in one of his famous books, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. They also have 2 movies from this, or maybe even a couple more. One of them called The Grinch, and the other one's called How the Grinch Stole Christmas. So if you guys have seen this movie, great. You've probably heard this quote before. If not, totally recommend to watch it. It's a great Christmas movie. But this quote is referring to that the Grinch's heart was really small, but then after growing to love everybody, his heart grew 3 sizes bigger, as can be shown in that picture below. So something is right about this. Your heart does grow in size. It actually grows as you get older, but it usually won't just grow spontaneously like it did in the movie. But with that being said, let's talk about the size of a heart. So the size of a regular heart depends on how old you are. So if you're small and a kid just like you guys, the size of your heart is going to be about the same as your fist. So if you close your fist nice and tight like this, you go ahead, look at it, that's about the size of your heart. You can kind of put it right here in your chest to get a ratio of what your heart would look like compared to your body. So this is the size of your heart. Now for an adult, it's obviously a lot bigger because they have bigger bodies and they're bigger inside. So you're going to need a stronger, bigger heart to be able to pump blood through everything. So adults' hearts are about the same size as two fists together. So this would be the size of my heart, more or less. All these sizes are obviously approximate. They are not 100% two size, but that's how you can guesstimate the size of your heart. So then the next thing we're going to talk about is, where is your heart located? A lot of people have the misunderstanding that your heart is completely to your left side. That is not right. As you can see here on the picture on the right, your heart is actually almost in the center of your heart, or of your chest. The heart sits between both your lungs, which are the things you use to breathe. So it's pretty much right here towards the center. It does slightly go to your left side, but it's not completely on the left side like people believe. If you actually put a stethoscope or your ear to someone else's chest, if you put it right in the middle, that's usually where you can hear it the best. And if you listen, you'll hear a sound that kind of sounds like lub dub, lub dub. So maybe sometime when you're around your parents or your siblings, ask them if you can listen to their heart and see if you can hear that lub dub. It might be a little bit faster or slower depending how fast their heart rate is going at that time. Okay, so now I have a fun little fact for you. Did you guys know that the average heart beats this many times? So in one day, the average heart beats about 100,000 times. In a year, the heart beats 35 million times. And in your lifetime, you can average it to be about 2.5 billion times. Those are really big numbers, guys. And it's only one heart doing all this work, and it never takes any breaks. So you can imagine how strong and how hard of a worker the heart is to be able to keep up beating nonstop like that. So now that we're talking about heartbeats, let's talk a little bit about heart rates. So a heart rate is essentially the number of times your heart beats within a minute, and a minute is 60 seconds. So when you're resting, your heart is going to be a lot calmer, a lot slower, because you're not really using that much energy, so it doesn't have to beat fast or strong or as strong to get blood going through your whole body. Yet, if you're exercising or doing any other activity where your body would need more blood and oxygen distributed to everything, then your heart muscle is going to make it so it's going faster and harder when it's beating. There's a lot of different things that can make your heart speed up, and I'm sure lots of you guys have experienced at least one of these before, because it is pretty normal and it can even happen daily. So some of the things that can do this is emotions, such as when you're stressed or anxious, possibly temperature changes, so it's when it's really hot and you're sweating and stuff, your heart can go fast. Also, just depending on the body position you're in, you could be having a faster heart rate, such as when you're standing up compared to when you're laying down. Another reason is if you're taking certain medications. So several of you actually use inhalers for your asthma, and inhalers is a medication that makes your heart rate go faster. Another thing that does this is certain foods and drinks. So especially foods that have a lot of caffeine or a lot of sugar, those can get your heart rate fast if you drink in high quantities. So again, these are just a couple of things that can get your heart racing, but there's obviously a lot many more things, as your heart is something that's always pumping and a lot of things can affect it. So if you look at this chart right here, it's showing you what the typical heart rate would look like depending on how old you are. So if you're maybe in kindergarten, first grade, anywhere from 5 to 6 years old, your normal heart rate is about 75 when you're resting. If you're doing activity or doing other stuff, it could raise up to 100, 115 even. It really just depends on what you're doing. But no matter what, you usually want your heart rate to stay within that 75 to 115 range when you're resting at least. Now, the older you get, the lower your heart rate goes because it does get stronger and it doesn't have to beat as much. So 7 to 9, your range is 70 to 110. And then once you're 10 years and older, so this is most 4th and 5th graders, you guys' range is actually 60 to 100. This is the same range for actual adults. So by this time, your heart rate is pretty steady and almost the same as when you're older. So during our activity today, especially for you 2nd to 5th graders, you guys are going to get to calculate your heart rate. So when you do that, keep these numbers in mind to see if you're within the right range. So since we are going to be doing that for our activity today, if you're a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th grader, I am going to talk to you really quick on how to check your pulse. So even if you're in kinder and 1st grade, even though this might not be your activity for today, you can still definitely do this. And it's always a good thing to know just so you can kind of figure out what your heart rate is. So another way heart rate is sometimes called is pulse. So if you see pulse up here, it's because it means basically the same thing as heart rate. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to check where you can feel your heart rate. So a good spot is right here on your wrist. If you follow your thumb down to your wrist, right here, there's going to be a little bone and a tendon. So there should be like a little, maybe like a little crease or something that you can kind of put your fingers in. So you're going to go to the next step, which says apply gentle pressure with your index and your middle finger. So these 2 fingers only are the fingers you're going to want to hold right here. And if you don't feel it at first, you can definitely kind of move it up, move it down, move it to the inside a little bit more, move it to the outside a little bit more. Just feel around until you can actually feel it. You might have to be a little bit patient to be able to feel it. Once you get that feel for it, that's when you can start counting with the help of a timer or a clock or a watch, anything where you can see when the minute has passed. It also helps if you have someone helping you because that way you don't have to worry about starting and stopping the timer. So when you actually do this for the activity, it'll be on Google Slides. So if you go to the 2nd slide, there will be a little video for a timer for you so you can click start and stop. Again, if someone's there to help you, that makes it even easier. One thing I did want to add is there are other places to check for your pulse. It doesn't necessarily have to be right here on your wrist. There's also a spot right here on your neck where you can try finding it. It's usually actually even a little bit stronger and easier to find than the one on your wrist. There's also several other spots like the top of your feet, the back of your knee, and right here by your arm. So those are a little bit harder to find, so I don't recommend trying to do those for the purpose of the activity, but you're always more than welcome to feel your feet, feel your arm, feel your knees to see if you can find some of those pulses. Okay, so now that we've talked about the heart, the next thing we're going to talk about is the blood vessels. The blood vessels were that second part of the cardiovascular system. These blood vessels consist of 3 different parts. The 3 different types of blood vessels are arteries, veins, and capillaries. They all do different things. So if you look here on the picture to the left, you can see the arteries are those red ones on the left-hand side, and the veins are the blue ones on the right-hand side. The capillaries are kind of the connecting point between the 2. So it all kind of goes in circles and circles because the circulatory system all connects one way or another, and it all goes through your body together. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about each individual one. So first, let's talk about arteries. So arteries actually carry the blood away from your heart. And these are the ones that have oxygen. So I know we talked a little bit earlier about if you were going through the right side of the heart, it takes it to your lungs so that way it can get oxygen. So then after it goes from there, you're going to be using your arteries to distribute it to the rest of your body because that blood now has oxygen. And like I mentioned before, oxygen is really important for you to breathe and for your muscles to be able to function like they're supposed to. So the arteries are the ones responsible for getting this to your body. After the blood goes through the arteries, it usually goes through the capillaries. These capillaries usually absorb and exchange oxygen, which we talked about before, nutrients, hormones, and a couple other important things that your body needs. These capillaries are located usually on top of tissue, muscles, and other stuff around your body. So that's where that absorption is going to happen, and that oxygen is going to leave the blood and go into your muscles, tissues, and other things that you need it to. So after the capillaries, it's going to then go to the veins. So this is where the veins carry blood back towards the heart. So at this point, they do not have oxygen anymore, because like we just mentioned, during when the blood is at the capillaries, the blood gets rid of its oxygen and it gets absorbed into the rest of your body. So again, it usually goes from your arteries to your capillaries and to your veins. And through that process, it starts with oxygen, then the oxygen gets absorbed, and then it returns to your heart without oxygen, and then at your heart, it sends it to your lungs, and then it gets oxygen again. So it's just one big circle, and your blood is just circulating and circulating and circulating inside your body. And that is one of the big things that makes it function. So as you notice, everything kind of functions together. So I have this really famous quote that says, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." And this is by Helen Keller. So this quote I thought fit perfectly to what we're talking about, because as you can see, the heart and blood vessels work together to get blood and oxygen throughout your entire body. By themselves, they would not do much, but as a team, they can do amazing things that let us live and function the way we do. This is only one of the many systems our body has. There are lots of systems that work together to create us completely as humans. So throughout the next few lessons, we're going to learn a lot more about the other different body systems, but this basically sums up the main points about the cardiovascular system. With that being said, thank you so much. If you guys have any questions, feel free to join me during my office hours. Like I mentioned in the intro video, these are optional and they're different for each grade level. So if you're in your grade classroom, you see it in blue letters saying what time and what day your specific grade's office hours are. So if you have questions, definitely feel free to join me. You can always also contact me. Here's my email, and there's also my office phone number. If you need to write those down, you can pause the video and write those down really quick. But if not, that is all for today. So once you're done viewing this lesson, go over to the poster in the classroom and go ahead and get started on your activity. Thank you for joining me for this week's lesson. I hope to see you guys during my office hours. Bye.